Hello, everyone. My name is Janelle Linton. I am an assistant program director for community engagement for a long COVID study called Recover, and that stands for Researching COVID to Enhance Recovery. And I've been doing that for the past 3 years. And it's been great. As I mentioned earlier, I am from New York, originally from the Bronx, New York. Went to Syracuse University for my undergraduate degree. Crazy enough, I celebrated 10 years of graduating from Syracuse the other day when I went to, CBT, which is called Coming Back Together, where the university gets all of the minority students back on campus, and that was actually an amazing experience to just see how Syracuse has changed over the years, see students and meet students, and also kind of like see things that you used to be a part of still exist. That was actually really cool. And after that, I went to get my master's at NYU, School of Public Global Health, and I got my master's in public health, specializing in global health and leadership. And then from there, I immediately went and worked for NYU. And at first, I was a palliative care coordinator, and I was doing that for about 4 years. And then the pandemic hit, and I wanted to change. It wasn't only that I wanted to change from palliative care and working as a program coordinator. I also knew I wanted to be a leader in my field. I also knew I wanted to help underserved communities. And I was also very intrigued by COVID because it just changed everyone's life. And at NYU, I decided to reach out to a few mentors, and they told me about this study that's funded by the NIH, but being operated out of NYU. And I interviewed, and I was a program manager there, for 2 years, and then I just worked my way up to where I am now. So,
Sounds really fascinating.
yeah.
So what have been some like significant findings that you've kind of found during your COVID research? I mean, I'm sure it's been, interesting. I'm sure you found a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I want to be very specific about what my role is in the study. I'm not a scientist, but what I
Sure.
do is ensure that scientists, clinicians, patients, caregivers, and community members work together to understand what long COVID is.
Mm,
And that has been very novel approach in research. And I'm very proud to be a part of that type of process and to kind of build that process over the years, because not a lot of studies do that. They really just focus on, the science background and getting it out to other scientists, and that's that. But what we try to do, specifically, the community engagement team that I oversee, is we try to make sure that high level science, make sure it gets trickled down to the community and that they understand it well. And so right now we're sort of in our, analysis phase. So we, are closing enrollment, and we're doing a lot of studies. So it's a very exciting time for us. And as I said, we're still learning, but as of so far, what we've learned is that there's over probably 200 plus symptoms for long COVID, right? And that's been reported through our studies. So from brain fog to coughing to loss of sleep, loss of appetite. Like these are symptoms that can be identified as long COVID. And a lot of times, people look at those things after they've had COVID and don't think it's anything at all. But if you have it
mm,
and it persists after you had COVID, maybe 6 months or more, you potentially have long COVID, and you should probably go to a long COVID clinic or speak to your physician about those symptoms. Another thing that we found is, like, I believe a lot of people thought that kids can't get long COVID.
mm,
That's not true. Children can get long COVID. And in fact, the symptoms look different depending on your age group. So, there are some commonalities across, but then there are certain specific ones depending on if you are, between the age of 1 and 6, or if you're a teenager or an adult, right? And even elderly. So, we're kind of looking at all of the age groups. We're looking at, even ethnic backgrounds and trying to see, how does it affect different populations. And I think that's the most important thing for me, and an intriguing thing for me is to make sure that those communities, those underserved communities that don't necessarily get these resources or understand what this is, get the information. So working and partnering with nonprofit organizations, working and partnering with churches, institutions, schools, and the NIH to make sure that, as I mentioned earlier, that this information does not get stuck at the top and only
Right.
with, scientists and researchers and individuals in academia, but it also gets translated so that the community understands, so that they know, not only can identify it in themselves, but if they have a family member or people in their, community that have similar symptoms, they can say, hey, I know about this study. They researched this. You should probably go and find out if you have long COVID, right? Um, Another thing we recognize is long COVID is real. Some people don't think it's real. Some people think it's like in people's minds, and I think
Mm,
that's because a lot of the symptoms have to do with neurology, like your the way how your mind works.
mm,
Some people, a lot of it is where you can't see it,
mm.
and oftentimes when people have symptoms where you can't necessarily see, others try to not say like, "Oh, that doesn't exist," or "It isn't happening for you." So, we try to make sure that we continue that narrative, like, "No, this long COVID is real, long COVID is real, and this is how it is." So, I'll absolutely make sure that you have our website and things like that so people can research more, but there's so much that we're learning as we go. But those are some of the big ones that, I would say pop out and that I think people should know about.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow. Yeah, that really sounds like a lot. I mean, I think I've heard people say, "Oh yeah, like, long COVID's not a thing," and
Yeah.
I'm glad that you all are really shedding light into, how serious it really is.
Right, right. And part of the study is also trying to find out how to cure it, right? What are the treatments? So
Mhm.
I'm a part of the observational study, which is basically we're observing symptoms, we're observing in the populations to help inform clinical trials. So a lot of what we're learning in our study will be used and applied into clinical trials so that they can create medicine or treatment for long COVID. So,
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
a lot going on and it's super important, and we're fighting every year to make sure that we keep getting funded to do this work.
So I'm sure throughout your experience you've had, to overcome challenges or you face challenges throughout the process. Could you kind of talk about that and you know, how you and your team have been able to overcome them?
So I was sort of like a program coordinator and a manager and a director all at the same time.
Mhm.
And then I had to, set boundaries, communicate with my leadership, be very transparent about what can happen and what can't happen in a certain amount of time, as well as
Mhm.
make sure that my staff felt supported,
Right.
and still interested in doing this work
Mhm.
because that's very important, especially because we're hybrid, and I work 100% remotely
Right.
because I am located in Toronto, but
Mhm.
sometimes I do make sure if I'm in New York to visit family and friends, I make time to go to the office and meet up with my team and do things with them. But my team is based in New York City, and I just encourage them to make sure they go out to outings, engage with the rest of the study who is in the area. Because that's one thing about our study. It's so large, it's a national study. So
Wow.
staff is across the country. But
Right.
because the observational side is located in NYU, a lot of staff come from NYU. So, but
Mm.
we're all remote. So, you just have to, kind of allocate periods of the year where you're like, we're going to get together, we're going to do a retreat, we're going to just to keep
Right.
morale up and make people feel like, they're still connected not only to NYU, but they're connected to their team and they're connected to the work that they're doing. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges over my year of my career at NYU is the
Mhm.
changes in a study and how, you can go from having all the money to do everything to then it cut in half. And then you got to figure out how to make sure that this information still gets done. This work still gets done in a timely fashion because the public is waiting. They're waiting for results. They want to know, especially since we are like $1 billion study, right?
Yeah, it sounds like there's definitely a lot of intentionality that goes into a lot of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you don't mind me asking, what exactly inspired the move to Toronto specifically, and how's that experience been for you overall?
My fiance is actually from Toronto. I known him since I was in high school. But and then we kind of kindled our relationship about 5 years ago. Um,
Okay.
2 years ago is when I decided, I'm gonna move to Toronto. Not only because I was remote and I was like, why not? But it's also we were doing this long distance relationship during a pandemic and it was really hard. And I think one of the most hardest things of moving to Toronto was just finding my community and finding
Right.
things that I did in New York up here. Because I
Mhm.
love to dance, I love to sing. Like these are things that I do. When I was in New York, I would do dance classes, Afrobeat, hip
Really?
hop, those type of things, and I can find that here. So I just had to like talk to people and go to events and they're like, "Yeah, that's here," or you just gotta find things. And I think that was the hardest part, but that's anything when you're moving to a new city, right? You have to
Mhm.
uh, kind of find your people or find people who have common interests and build from
Right.
there.
Very, very nice. So yeah, so I guess in kind of, working remotely, living in Toronto, like, I guess what advice would you give to someone who's maybe in a similar situation, or for leaders, or people trying to build a team, in a hybrid
Mhm.
remote workplace?
Yeah, most important things is, as I mentioned, just trying to build in time throughout the year to connect with your team.
Right.
And not only in a way of like, oh, let's go through your reports or what our to-dos are, but
Mhm.
actually like set apart time to do some professional development with them in person.
Mm.
Um, so as I mentioned, I would go down to New York, usually around the holiday season because I want to see my family and I'll just make sure that I coordinate time with my team and others who work alongside my team because in community engagement, nothing is done in silos. We have to collaborate with different aspects of the study. So, we've become very close with other, sections in the study and departments. So, trying to collaborate with those leaders on, hey, let's get all of our people together in one space to kind of do a retreat to also understand what other people's are doing because it's such a large study, and also find time to do happy hours and just
Right.
relax, get to know your staff. I think is very important, and it's something that I try to embed in my years since I started moving here. I definitely just, as I said, encourage people to find time to do just to connect with the team, and it could be quarterly, it can be, twice a year, whatever works for your schedules, just so your staff still feels connected to you as a leader and to the work that they're doing. And
Right.
that's something that I've been exercising for the last 2 years, and it worked. I mean, I've been able to keep my staff very happy, and they've been able to, they have their flexibility to do their work, but they know, twice a year we're going to get together with Janelle and we're going to do something that's either really fun or also um, something that's geared towards professional development. I've also encouraged my staff to, do workshops, go to conferences, um,
Mhm.
and so that means taking time away from your day to day to go and learn something else. And I think that has been helpful because when I was a program coordinator, I didn't have those. I didn't have a manager who encouraged that.
I love that. That's a great attitude to have.
Yeah, I
Um,
try.
Yeah, really, really cool. Yeah, so kind of going back to professional development, how did you get involved with the DLE originally?
Myself, there were things that I wanted to develop. And there was things that I knew if I wanted to be successful in life, I needed to learn. And I feel like the DLE was, an experience that will get me there, or at least show me, how to tap into that within myself. So it was a weekend of, laughter, sometimes crying, because, sometimes you recognize some things about yourself that you're like, wow, I need to get it together. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And it was also like, wow, why didn't anyone else? Like a moment of realization, or like, why isn't this taught in school? Like, we should be learning this from high school or middle school. And it takes this special, experience to be given to me. And I kind of wanted that for everyone, right? And one of the experiences that I remembered vividly is um learning your elevator pitch. And I
Right.
hated that because I was like, oh, that's uncomfortable, like you're in an
Right.
elevator with someone that you really want to connect with. What do you do? And they're like, you have this amount of time to, basically sell yourself. And um that I remember that being one of the most uncomfortable uh project not projects what was it, it was kind of like a webinar or workshop for me, because I wasn't used to like putting myself out there and pitching myself to someone. I kind of, at that time, when it came to my work, uh, was the person that took the back seat and just like to observe. So even though I come across as very like friendly and extroverted, when it came to my work, I was very introverted. And the
Mm,
reason why is because I didn't think I was an expert. So
mm,
I thought I needed to sit back.
mm,
But I think what the DLE taught me is that we all have our little super like special power, and you
mm,
should not be sitting back when you can
mm,
absolutely shine in these rooms where others come in and they shine bright because they have the confidence, right? So instilling that confidence to us was important. And as I mentioned, I just remember that workshop and being so uncomfortable, but by the end of it, I was able to do my elevator pitch. And I've used that, after college. I've used it not only, during interviews, but also if I was wanted to work with someone or do a special project with someone. I knew how to kind of tailor my message in a very short way to at least get them to say, let me call you back, or let me send you an email, or let's follow up later, or let's catch lunch later. um, as I said, those little tips I still remember to this day, and still use, and I tell my staff about it, right? And I'm also someone who loves to mentor. So whoever is interested in um, connecting with me and learning about my background, I also try to drop those gems there too, because as I said, it helped me get where I am now.
Wow, great. So it sounds like the DLEs really helped you a lot,
Yeah,
kind of build a lot of those foundational things to succeed in your career. So that's great to hear. As we're wrapping up everything, would you have any advice to, anyone, graduating or, maybe even making a big move or changing their career or starting out, something and, might encounter some challenges? Any advice you would give or uh,
yeah. Trust your gut,
mhm,
man. A lot of us don't make that move or that change because you're so scared of the unknown.
right.
And if you feel like it's a good decision, then go with it. And the
Mhm.
worst is it's a bad decision and you just learn from it, right? And then you just move forward. So that's one of the biggest things that I think I would share with others is like it's important to trust your gut and just bet on yourself, and know that everything doesn't need to be planned out, entirely. I got caught up in that as well, like wanting everything to be perfect and planned out to the T and to the very end. And that's just not life. That's just not life. Sometimes you got to take a risk. Sometimes you just got to put yourself out there and be uncomfortable. And I'm learning that being uncomfortable in a stage in your life is okay, because that means you're growing. That means you're learning. If you're too comfortable, you're not learning nothing. And that's okay. Some people are fine with being that in that space, but if you are too comfortable and you want to be, you want to get to that next level, you got to be in that space where you're uncomfortable. And that's when you realize that shifts and changes in your life occurs. And I think, being someone who made very drastic changes between 2020 and now, a lot of those changes happened with me, of course, having concerns, of course, having doubts. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to take one day at a time. I'm just going to do it and see what happens. And as I mentioned, if I fall on my face or if something, bad occurs, it's a lesson. And I'm not going to beat myself up about it because nothing in life is perfect, right? So if you want to make that job, career change, and I, I just want to give you one more story. The reason how I got from being a program coordinator to a program manager is I started to speak to people in my network about what I thought I wanted to do, even though I wasn't 100% certain. And I just talked to people about their trajectories and I learned from their trajectories. And by putting myself out there and talking like, hey, I'm in the market. I wanna make this shift. This is not where I want to be anymore. That opened doors for me. But if old Janelle would have been quiet and just sit on Indeed all day and just apply to things and just pray that someone would send me an email saying I want to interview you. But honestly, this job that I have now was literally through conversations, impromptu conversations with people about what I wanted to do, where I saw my life, and asking like, how did you get from where you are before to where you are now? And then, as I said, doors started opening. People started introducing me to others who were like, hey, I heard about this opportunity. You should, I'm gonna put your name in, or you should reach out to this person, tell them, you've had a conversation with me, and see how that goes. And that's literally how I became, got to where I am now. So, just, and that was very uncomfortable for me. It was uncomfortable just because you're also talking about some things that you're uncertain about, right? And then you realize that some people in leadership positions also have those uncertainties or sometimes are uncomfortable about things, and it humanizes the experience. And I think
Mhm.
by doing those conversations and putting myself in those spaces, I realized like we're all human, we're all trying to figure this out together. And as long as you see yourself in a certain space, then you will get there. You just got to keep, working towards it and putting yourself, I would say, in that uncomfortable space. So I'm not saying live in it too long. You don't want to be in there, you don't want to be uncomfortable forever. But, I just recognize as I look back on my transition from New York and being a coordinator to now being in Toronto and being a director, um, it was those uncomfortable spaces that I learned to be who I am today. So I hope that's a good answer.
Yeah, I love that answer. Yeah, like embrace the uncomfortability
Yeah,
almost.
yeah, yeah. It's the only way.